today a Sundance award-winning film that gives us a gripping and unprecedented front seat to recent history, about an election that was believed to be stolen and a people who felt robbed of their first free and fair vote following the removal of longtime former president and effective dictator Robert Mugabe by military coup in Zimbabwe.
This is a coup.
It's a coup.
Yeah, it's a coup.
This is a coup.
The results that have been announced have not been verified by us.
An assassination attempt was made only last week. Chamisa has survived so many assassination attempts.
Mr. Chamisa, you are the hope for Zimbabwe. Please do not take that hope away from us.
That was from the documentary President, made by filmmaker Camilla Nielsen, who joins me from Copenhagen. Hello there, Camilla. Now, the film follows opposition candidate Nelson Chamisa in his 2018 campaign against the sitting president of Zimbabwe, Emmerson Mnangagwa, from ZANU-PF, the party that has controlled the country since independence. But this is a story not just about Zimbabwe, but about democracy as a whole, isn't it?
Absolutely. We premiered President on the Sundance Film Festival in the beginning of January last year, just 3 weeks after the attack on the Capitol Hill in Washington. And from having filmed and edited a story that some people might see as a sort of an African story or a niche Zimbabwean story, suddenly it became a global narrative. The issues that are raised in the Zimbabwean story about rigging and ballot cheating suddenly mirrored this situation in the United States. So yes, absolutely, I think it's a universal story.
The film starts with Chamisa's rallies of tens of thousands of supporters, energised by his promise to deliver the country from its strongman party, ZANU-PF. Zimbabwe had been ruled by Robert Mugabe since 1980, until he was ousted in a military coup in 2017. We hear the people chanting, "Change, change, change, a new beginning," phrases like "nothing will stop us, a new Zimbabwe is coming." The stage was set for a free and fair election, but the film shows us maybe that was not to be. Describe what we see.
Well, Mugabe had been in power in Zimbabwe since independence in 1980. So that's almost a 40-year rule. I think he started out well, but his rule became increasingly autocratic. And by the end, just before he was ousted in 2017, he was in his early 90s, mid-90s almost. And I think basically had run out of ideas as a head of Zimbabwe. And also he had amended the country's constitution many times in order to ensure his executive powers. So it was a de facto dictatorship. There was no freedom of speech. The country was run down economically. And I think most of the young population in Zimbabwe born after 1980 had never experienced another president than Robert Mugabe. So there was really, as I saw it and felt it, generally a big desire and almost a desperation for change, for a new wind to come. The only opposition that had survived the political landscape in Zimbabwe was, of course, the iconic Democrat Morgan Tsvangirai, who had been battling Mugabe in several elections over almost 2 decades, and allegedly won several of those presidential elections, but never been able to take power, as those elections had been rigged, allegedly. And so there was really, I think, generally, on both sides of the political divide, a wish to make a clean slate and have a free and fair election that could not be doubted.
And Camilla, this isn't a film with interviews and a narrator. Your crew is there at every turn. The election is held and allegedly stolen right before your cameras. Let's watch the moment the police shut down a press conference.
Here for a press conference with Nelson Chamisa, and as you can see, the riot police have just turned up.
الشرطة طردت الصحفيين ومنعتهم من إقامة المؤتمر ومنعت المعارضة من إقامة المؤتمر الصحفي فيما تزال تتمركز أمام مقر المعارضة. هنا كان مقررا لتحالف المعارضة أن يعقد مؤتمرا صحفيا ولكن قاموا بمنع.
So this is a democracy. Where are you shutting Shoving her events. The last 4 days. This is quite extraordinary.
Everything we see is what you and your cameras witnessed. How did you get this access?
Well, before filming President, I had made a film in Zimbabwe about when the country attempted to write a new democratic constitution. And that was a quite lengthy filming process. We filmed over 3 years, compiled 400 hours of footage. And that film was banned by Mugabe, which was rather idiosyncratic given that the process that we had filmed was the making of a new democratic constitution, ensuring freedom of speech. And after a 3-year legal battle, we finally managed to unban the film and lift the ban. I flew to Harare for the hearing, and it was during a celebration dinner where we celebrated the lifting of our first film that some of the protagonists from my first documentary suggested that I come back and do a follow-up film. So a total of 8 years of engaging with the democratic struggle in Zimbabwe, I think, meant that when we finally started to roll our cameras about the presidential election, we had a lot of trust already, basically.
So it's taken up a large part of your life so far. In one scene in the film, in President, the crew is caught in crossfire that leaves 6 people dead during a demonstration over the contested result. Nelson Chamisa has to go into hiding because of death threats. There were even assassination attempts on his life. In making the film, you put yourself at risk. What made you keep going?
Well, Eve, I think when we made the first film, we were filming on both sides of the political divide. We were filming with ZANU-PF and we were filming with the MDC Alliance, or the MDC as it was called back then. And so there was a certain protection and everybody wanted this new constitution. So back then we felt reasonably safe. And then when the invitation came to come back and follow the presidential election, you know, I knew that it was still ZANU-PF who were in charge. I knew of their history, but there was also a sense of new winds that had come, that, you know, there was an attempt to create a new dispensation and a new democracy. And it was an election also. You know, we didn't think we were flying into a war zone, but on that day where these 6 innocent people were killed by the Zimbabwean military, I would say it came out of nowhere. It started as a small demonstration in front of the Electoral Commission's headquarters in downtown Harare. It was a protest that they felt that the results of the presidential election was being withheld. The demonstrators were met with first water cannons and then tear gas, and finally, within about half an hour, 45 minutes, there were military helicopters in the street, and live ammunition was shot, and 6 people who weren't even demonstrating, most of them, I should say, just regular Zimbabweans trying to escape the chaos, were shot in cold blood, and it was devastating. It was a terrible day, and I think all the hope that everybody had about this being, you know, time for real change was just kind of collapsed in a matter of an hour.
I want to talk to you about the hope that's left. Over a year ago, we had Zimbabwean writer Tsitsi Dangaremba on the show. She'd recently been arrested for protesting against the ZANU-PF. We talked to her about the popular uprising in the country and if she thought it would lead to change. Have a listen.
Sometimes I think that keeping people in poverty is strategy of control. And so I think until we can find ways around these issues, the resistance will remain low key. But I think that the movement, the consciousness, let me say, is changing. People are beginning to realize that we do have to take our government to task. And I think that in the midterm, we may see some change.
Camilla, do you hope to make a third film to complete the trilogy, and what do you hope it will be about?
Well, I should say that I agree with Tizi's assumption that there are amazing things happening in Zimbabwe at the moment that leads observers like me with a lot of hope. Nelson Chamisa didn't he could have been the world's youngest president. I'm convinced that, the election was there's all indicators that he did win the election and it was stolen from him. But instead of, going into a corner and being upset about the steal, he actually started to rebuild the democratic movement, the opposition movement from the bottom up. He embarked on a massive voter registration campaign. Just after the uprising that Tizi is talking about was cracked down on very hard. I think he managed to energize a large segment and a large demographic of the Zimbabwean people into registering to vote. My documentary is a testimony of what I saw in front of my camera happened, and hopefully it can help the international community and observers of the political situation in Zimbabwe to not make the same mistakes. There's a lot of room for improvement from the international community as well.
Okay, Camilla, we always end our show with our guests' cultural pick of the moment. You've chosen a TV series about corruption and a thirst for power, Succession, going on with the theme. Why have you chosen that?
It's like a Shakespearean family drama. And it just keeps you up all night. I think also, besides it being about politics, which I'm interested in as a filmmaker myself, I think it's like an almost anthropological glimpse into the 1% that we rarely get to understand from the inside. I mean, a lot of the world's most rich and powerful people we hear about in the tabloids, or not at all. And I think the way this series is written and performed, especially Jeremy Strong, I think it's just stellar.
Camilla Nielsen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
President is available in cinemas and on digital. Remember our website. We're also on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.
Roman is a knucklehead, Shiv is a fake, and Kenny is screwy. I've seen more than any of them.
This life is not for everyone. It's a number on a piece of paper. It's a fight for a knife in the mud.
I'm a good guy. I'm better than you.
In 2020, 4 years after the referendum and the conclusion of bitter negotiations, Brexit went into effect. On the European stage, the United Kingdom had now gone solo. For its fiercest supporters, it was a triumph.
Against all the odds, the most unlikely victory of modern times.
Brexit is about self-government.
But problems loomed ahead. Over immigration, violence, and the fate of Northern Ireland.
That creates instability and it creates anger.
Brexit and the feeling that the outside community have of the British, they're not coming back.
Watch Brexit Year One in Revisited on France 24 and France24.com.